The ITN Archive, it's real. It's real, and I think that's very important. Can we cut that bit up as a soundbite, please? Hi, is this on now? Yes, brilliant. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the ITN National Archives Week event. It's lovely to have so many of you here. I know that some of you are still grabbing your sweets, but I'm actually going to get cracking because there is so much that we want to get through today. I guess that's the problem when you've got an archive, a lovely problem, an archive that dates from 1955 onwards, is there is just no shortage of things to talk about or to bring in. We have an absolutely brilliant panel here today. I will introduce them later. But first of all, I just want to start by saying, what is the ITN Archive? I think it's one of the things that we here at ITN should be most proud about. It dates back to 1955, and it's one of the world's most extensively digitised news archives. We've got an incredible selection of footage, royals, politics, show business, domestic, international, and I like to think of it really as one of the UK's most important cultural repositories of material from the 20th and 21st century. We have 2 petabytes worth of content. That is a lot. It equates to about 8.25 years of footage or 72,500 hours of video. And we probably add about 3 or 4 hours of footage to it every single day. We have a fantastic archive team, some of whom have helped make this event happen today. And their job is to catalogue the material on a daily basis so that it can be saved and safely reused. So just before we get cracking, we're just going to play a little show reel to give you a flavour of what is in the archive.
3, 2, 1, go.
I wouldn't want to fashion myself after any one individual.
We're just being ourselves, basically.
Dig that crazy rhythm.
Good God.
Hello, my name is Fiance.
After I'm through beating him, I think you'll have to join the Beatles and be a singer.
We'll have to change. We can't do the same thing all the time.
I will not accept that it's a highly dangerous road.
Whatever in love means.
The Central Reserve safety fencing will go ahead.
Right. You turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
Stand the
We have touched the conscience of a large segment of our nation.
And that's all the news from ITN. Sorry, can I do one more take? One last take. Sorry.
So that is just a snippet of some of the brilliant moments that we have in the archive. So just in terms of sort of the nuts and bolts of what it is, it's a mix of digitised and undigitised clips. So basically everything from 2006 onwards, both bulletins and rushes, are what we call natively digital. That means that they were sort of ingested digitally at the time. But everything before that is a mix of sort of physical assets, so tapes and film reels, much of which is housed off-site at City Lab in Stockroom. We are working really hard with camera teams at the moment to try and make sure that going forward, as well as getting our cut packages in, we get more of the rushes that crews are filming out in the road, because we feel that that's some of the moments that don't actually make it onto our TV screen, but we want to make sure that they're being sort of saved for posterity. I think that although most of the staff here at ITN are sort of aware that we've got this archive, they probably don't know about some of the kind of other assets that we have in it. So we've just done a little clip from Cinelab in Slough, which is where we keep our film reels. And this is probably one of the rarest things that we have in the archive, an archivist on camera.
Hi, I'm here at Cinelamp in beautiful sunny Slough, where ITN stores its film collection. We have over 20,000 of these. Film cans up on the shelves, in storage down in the vaults, including rushes, special programs, going all the way back to 1955, through the fall of Saigon, the death of Winston Churchill, and a lot of other incredible historic material.
And that, of course, is Matt Harris, who's here today at the back. So why is the archive important? Well, it's important because it gives context to current stories. It's also a fantastic resource that's there for ITN journalists to use in the work that they do when they need to call on a historical moment, and also for our ITN Productions teams to use in the long form and documentaries that they do. We'll be hearing more about that from Mike later. Our archive is also sold and licensed exclusively by Getty, and this kind of gives it a new life where it can be incorporated and used in other people's work as well as a kind of cultural record. And this week we also had a really exciting announcement about the fact that we are partnering with a company called Open Origins, who are a new startup who are going to be, well, started already, they are anchoring our archive onto the blockchain. Essentially, this is a way of us authenticating the archive as being exactly that, genuine news clips shot by a genuine camera person. And we're doing this because we are concerned that as we move into a world with more and more AI-generated synthetic media, it's going to be really important for us to be able to sort of put down a marker and say conclusively and indelibly that the material that we have in the ITN archive is genuine and it's trustworthy. So that's a really exciting new move. Okay, I'm going to introduce our panel. So we have Lindsey Hilsum, who is the international editor for Channel 4 News. We've got Philippa Collins, who is a multi-skilled camerawoman and editor also at Channel 4 News, and Mike Griffiths, who is an executive producer for ITN Productions international unit and has recently been working on the world's most notorious killers, and we'll be hearing a bit about his Fred West documentary later. So before we start with Lindsey, I just want to kick off with a couple of just sort of general questions. Do you use the archive? Is it important to you? How does it figure in your working lives?
Oh, okay. Look, I went into journalism because I wanted to be where history is happening. But sometimes when you're there at those historical moments, you don't quite understand the significance of what you're seeing. But when you're working for ITN, for Channel 4 News, Philippa or whoever I'm with is filming it all around us. And so sometimes I just look at it and go, wow, we were there. I was there. And then when we're doing stories like, we're doing stories obviously all the time about Israel and Gaza at the moment, Ukraine, Afghanistan. And in my day-to-day work at Channel 4 News, you know, someone will say, oh look, we've got the agencies have got, you know, a whole thing of the history. And I'm going, no. We have the ITN archive. We were there. Let's use our pictures.
I don't need. Well, hello. I grew up watching the miners' strike on TV and all those that kind of era. And when I started my career, the Bosnian War was just finishing. But all through college, I've watched it, and I was hooked on TV news from an early age. And I think those moments that you see then, they stay with you, and I think that's what formed what I wanted to do with my life, basically, my career. And to your question about do we use it, how relevant is the archive? I use it quite a lot in terms of, for example, in April we were in Berlin. Rishi Sunak was meeting the Chancellor talking about European security. And what we do quite a lot is sometimes match the shots, the shots from history, and then we shoot our own and sort of fade through. So we had shots of the damaged Reichstag after the war and mixed through to current pictures. And I think it just adds a richness to the report that you're doing and the point you're trying to make. So that's me.
I'm going to be very disappointing because I didn't watch telly as a teenager and feel a calling to work in television. I think like most television producers, I found it by accident and then discovered a love of storytelling. and a passion for it. And what's interesting is Lindsey talks about how you don't realise that you're there at the time. I'm sort of at the other end of that. I'm the one who's watching Tammy's archive going, but is there more of this? Is there more? Because I don't feel like I'm there yet, you know, and I think that's the magic of having, you know, working in a company like this and having this archive available to you, is that you can ask Matt if there's anything hidden away in Slough that will let you know what the weather was like that day and tell the story of the build-up, and it's fascinating. So from the point of view of a storyteller, you know, archive is a huge part of my job, my life.
Brilliant. And Lindsey and Philippa, I guess one for you. What does it feel like when you see your footage that you filmed sort of popping up in a different piece of work at a later date?
Look, it's thrilling because I think we did something which was significant for the historical record. And that's why other people are using this. And then I get students contacting me, in particular, you know, they've seen something on YouTube or whatever. What I think of as now, they think of as history, of course. 2003, that was yesterday, wasn't it? And I find it thrilling because I think that we are contributing to that historical record in a very important way, particularly in a time of fake news. And I was interested in what you were saying about the blockchain, where people don't know what's real and what's not real. The ITN Archive, it's real. It's real, and I think that's very important.
Can we cut that bit up as a soundbite, please? Have you had that experience of seeing your work resurfacing in you guys?
Yeah, several times. I mean, I probably speak for all of the crews at ITV and Channel 4. You know, my contemporaries have probably all had the same experience where you're watching something and you go, hang on a minute, that's mine. You know, and it's an amazing experience, and you do feel, you know, very proud, and also quite pleased that you didn't screw it up. So at the time, but I also, it's not quite, I quite like seeing things like Mr. Bates and the Post Office, because they absolutely expertly matched my shots, well, and other people's shots from outside the court. So I like the way that Drama now watches the archive and then matches it and makes it real, which, you know, that's another sort of contribution of the archive.
Can I add something to that? Whoops. Yeah, so there was a moment when I was watching The Night Manager. Do you remember that drama on BBC Two? And suddenly I'm hearing my own voice, because the way the main character discovers what's going on in the uprising in Egypt, he's watching Channel 4 News, of course he is. And so you hear it was, I have to say, I got more messages on WhatsApp saying, oh, I've just heard you on the television than I do normally from Channel 4 News.
So our friends from Getty, can we just check that The Night Manager actually licensed that, please? Thank you. All right, okay, I'm going to turn to Lindsey now for a little while, if you want to give her the mic. So, Lindsey, we've got a few of your clips here which we're going to go through and talk about, but can you tell me why you chose your first one and what it is?
Yeah, so the first clip is from 2003, and it's what at the time was an extremely obscure story with multi-skiller Soren Monk. He and I went off to Equatorial Guinea in West Africa. It's a very small country, and it's a petro-state, and I had got obsessed with it. And I got obsessed with it because the leader, Teodoro Obiang, who is now, by the way, the longest standing ruler in the world. I mean, he's bloody old, he was old then. And all the money from the petrol was going into his own personal account at the Riggs Bank DuPont Circle in Washington. Anyway, it took me a long time to persuade our then editor, Jim Gray, that this was an important story. So we're just going to show the clip, and then I'm going to explain why it was very important to the archive. So let's show a little bit of Equatorial Guinea.
The people of this village are waiting for the president to arrive, and they're still waiting to see the real benefit of the petrodollars as well. Woe betide anyone who doesn't turn up. Attendance at presidential speeches is compulsory, enthusiasm obligatory. State radio has said President Obiang is like God. He can kill without anyone calling him to account and without going to hell, it said. It's not that the Americans don't know what's happening, but he's protected by America's thirst for new sources of oil and by his Moroccan bodyguards.
So it got us an RTS, by the way, and an Amnesty Award, I think, as well. So it was good in its own right. A year later, there was a coup attempt involving a bunch of South African mercenaries and a British mercenary called Simon Mann, who was caught and who ended up in Equatorial Guinea in Black Beach Prison, which we had filmed. ITN was the only people who had that kind of footage of the leader of Equatorial Guinea and an interview with him. So, I mean, I hope I earn my keep normally in my day job, but I think on that archive, Soren and I have earned our keep several times over because it's sold and resold and resold.
Yeah, that was amazingly prophetic of you. And I have to say, having watched it, that's definitely a president who is not used to being interviewed or being asked any questions.
Yeah, it was interesting. So basically I was interviewed, they kept wanting me to have a translator speak Spanish. I'm like, no, I speak Spanish. I'm not having a translator because I knew they wouldn't translate my questions. Anyway, we get to the sort of real bit and I'm saying, so, you know, this account at the Riggs Bank, you are the only signatory. And he said, no, the Minister of Petroleum also signs. I said, yeah, but he's your uncle. And at that point, unbeknownst to me, they were poking Soren in the back. They were trying to jostle him and get the camera out of the way. He said that the pressure of just the breath behind him was extraordinary. But luckily I was oblivious, so I just plowed on.
It's a really great watch. Okay, should we play the second clip, which is from Iraq, November 2004.
This is the most dangerous engagement India companies had in Fallujah. A group of Marines is pinned down on a flat rooftop. The fire team are going to hit the insurgents with an anti-tank missile.
We're gonna pop up, we're gonna do 5 seconds of suppression. Go, hose up!
The back blast of the missile engulfs everyone in dust. They've made a tactical withdrawal to this rooftop here, waiting for air power to come in and bomb the remaining insurgents. The end of the Muslim fast of Ramadan is marked by the sickle moon. Americans control Fallujah, the ruined city of mosques.
Actually, that sort of makes my heart go every time I see it. It was shot by Tim Lambon, who no longer works for ITN. And the thing which I think is remarkable about it, so Tim used to be a soldier before he was a camera operator. And I know when you see a lot of battle footage, it's sort of the cameras all over the place. It isn't, because he knew what the order of battle would be. We were embedded with the Americans, and he knew what would happen. First of all, you have the suppressive fire. Then he knew that they would call in airstrikes. That's why he's on the guy who's calling in the airstrikes, because he knew that would be what happened next. And so there's a sort of cinematic quality to it. I know that the actual quality isn't as brilliant as you would get nowadays, because it's from 2004. But it has that cinematic quality because it's filmed like a film. And I suppose the other thing I should say is that I was cowering in the armoured vehicle for most of the time, because they knew Tim had been a soldier, so they trusted him. They knew that if the shit really hit the fan, that he could drop the camera and pick up a rifle, whereas I can't. And so the best and most useful thing I could do was get out of the way. So I hopped up and did my piece to camera, then I hopped back in the armoured vehicle again.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sorry in a way that we can only show such a short clip of it, and I really do urge you all to go and see the longer form, because it's the sense of personal risk and jeopardy in that piece is so remarkable. And it made me wonder really about the relationship between you as the correspondent and your camera person, because it's so intimately kind of involved in that. I wonder whether you can just talk a little bit about how you prep for shooting something like that when you're on an embed.
It's all about trust. It's all about trusting each other. And Philippa and I trust each other a lot, don't we? And there's times when Philippa and our late and much beloved producer Sarah Cork, we were an extremely effective lady team, weren't we? Afghanistan, Iran, Libya, places where you might not expect a lady team to be particularly effective. We were extremely effective, weren't we?
They underestimated.
They underestimated us. But I think it is that, and Soren Monk, who shot the first piece, who I've probably worked with more than any other camera operator, actually, I suppose most people would say we're like an old married couple, bickering all the time. I can see a producer over there laughing because she's experienced it. That's Millie. But yeah, it's like you know what the other one is going to do. And also, as a correspondent, you don't get in the way. I know that they know what they're doing. And if I need to keep out of the way, I just keep out of the way.
Okay, right. Let's move on to the next clip, which is from Libya in August 2011.
So this is the day Gaddafi fell. This is going to make my heart beat faster too.
Bye bye! Gaddafi! Ciao, Gaddafi!
Today, the streets of Tripoli were full of joy.
These are the Shabab, the rebels from the mountains. They've been fighting for 6 months for this moment, when they bring the revolution to the capital of Libya.
They're destroying the remnants of Colonel Gaddafi's rule. They don't know where he is, but they want no mercy for him. It's a long and uncertain road to democracy and the rule of law, but today is a day in the history of this country like none other.
Yeah, so that was shot by Graham Heslop, who sadly is also no longer with us, and the producer was Sarah Corp. And, that is a day in history, isn't it? The day Gaddafi fell after 42 years, and we had come in, we were with the rebels, and we had slept overnight with the rebels. It was so hot. Oh my God, it was hot. And so we came in. Maybe it's become a cliche, but there's nothing I like more than a back of a pickup piece to camera. I know you can't quite hear what I'm saying, but I think it gives you the excitement. And I look at that pink scarf. Okay, sometimes I behave badly, right? So everybody knows I love a scarf. And the Libyan fighters all wore these scarves. And there was one who was wearing this lovely pink scarf. And so I complimented him on his scarf. And yes, I did know he would take it off and give it to me. It's still one of my favourite scarves. But yeah, and again, the quality of the pictures is not what you would get today. But I hope that in a piece like that, it conveys the moment, the excitement of that moment, which is something I will certainly never forget.
Well, I was going to ask you that because, obviously for the Libyans, you get a real sense that, as you say in the piece, this is something they have waited years for. But to some extent, it's a work day for you. You're there and you're doing a job. How do you kind of keep a work head on when you're regularly filming exceptional days in that nation's history?
Well, on the one hand, yeah, I'm a bit carried away by the excitement. Come on, part of our job is to convey what people around us are feeling. But then part of our job is to be the journalist who knows, it's probably not going to work out that well. And it didn't. But you have to sort of keep those two ideas in your head at the same time. In fact, at the same period in Egypt, I'm sometimes amazed when I look at the piece of camera I did from Cairo when Mubarak fell. Because we had, 4 minutes. We rushed, because it happened just before we went to air. So it's one of those, you've got one chance to get this right. So we went rushing down into the crowd, and I filmed a piece to camera, and I said what I thought, hadn't prepared it. And in that piece of camera, I say, the excitement is amazing, but this is really a military coup. It's not really a revolution. And I look back and I think, oh, I was right. That's a bit amazing, isn't it? I'm so often wrong. Luckily, I was.
And so that point about scripting, both the piece to camera, which, as you said, there was...
Which I never script.
Okay, good. Okay, that was one question. But do you ever, if you're spending the night before with the rebels, you know that you're going to go into Tripoli the next day, is there a sense that you're planning that script in your head and that that's something that you will talk through with your camera person? Or do you just go and leave the camera person to get the shots that they get and then you watch the footage afterwards and create a script around that?
It's kind of organic, but I think I've got to the point now where I find it hard to start unless I've seen the opening pictures. Because I've got ideas, so I've always done the structure I'm always doing the structure in my head, but the actual beginning to write, I ask the camera operator or editor, what should we start with? What's the best picture? And they will usually say, well, we could start with this, or we could start with this. And that's when the ideas come. But I think it's quite an organic process. What do you think, Philippa? She's agreeing with me.
Marvellous.
But presumably, Philippa, it's different with different reporters, right?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with lots of what Lindsey says. It's a very organic process, and you know, obviously I've got my own job to do, and that's to capture everything. So I'm trying to do that, but I'm also, we've always got time constraints. We've always got other things in the mix. At Channel 4 News, we work with very good producers. ITV often, I think they do work with producers abroad, but it's very much a team, so you're all making the decisions as you go along. But at the end of the day, you're all trying to make a really good report that's going to be on TV, that, you know, has all the pictures that Lindsey needs to write to, has every element in it. So, you know, if I'm capturing a wonderful shot of a sort of, you know, donkey disappearing into the distance or something, and the dust clouds or something, and then she's just seen something very, very important happening behind me, I wouldn't get upset if she tapped me on the shoulder and ruined my beautiful sunset shot, because, you know, something, if it's something very, very, you know, I've had that before where somebody's been coming out of a building and we absolutely have to have them, and I've been sort of doing something else, and you just have, and that's where the trust comes in. You just think, okay, I'm going to ditch that shot and go with it, because and you know, it often turns out to be that's the whole thing. I can't see everything, so it is a team thing.
And the other thing on the scripting is, so my most poetic lines, and there is a point where the producer quietly says, "Are you sure that's true?" And I always say, "Of course it's true." And then a few minutes later I go, "Well, okay, maybe we should change that line."
Fair enough. Okay, let's move into far more recent history. This is Ukraine, November 2022.
Okay, let's have a watch.
By now, the outgoing fire was getting intense, and there was incoming too. We've just heard sniper fire overhead after all the outgoing from the Ukrainian machine guns. So we're just going to stay down here for a bit. So we wait, listening.
3, 2.
After a few minutes of quiet, it's time for us to run across the open ground to the other trench. All safe. And now, down into the soldiers' sleeping quarters, and Vadim has a companion. Olyenka, the kitten, is just 2 months old.
She's a good warrior.
She's a good fighter.
So that was shot by Josh Ho, and the producer was Rob Hodge, and our local producer was Maxime Draber. So we had wanted to show what life was like for Ukrainian troops in trenches in the winter. And obviously I've got, you know, World War I poets in my head, and the song and Siegfried Sassoon, because it was so reminiscent. We got a little bit more than we had bargained for, because suddenly there was a sniper. And that meant that in the piece we were then able to show what it's really like for those troops, and what it's like for the Russians too, because they were in trenches 500 meters away. So, you know, it's quite a moment. So I'll tell you a couple of things about the moment when we first heard the sniper. The first thing, so we're going back to the trench, and we hear the sniper, so we go sort of down into the trench. That's the point of a trench. And the first thing I think is, oh God, I've got this mud on my bum. It's not good, is it? And then I think, ooh, we might have to wait here for quite a long time, because you know, who knows when it will be safe to go, and it's getting very cold. So I'm having all these little thoughts, and I look around at Rob and Josh, and Rob is doing the sign of the Muppet to me, which means, why aren't you doing a piece to camera? And so I think, oh shit, yes, okay. So I do a piece to camera. Anyway, so then we're there for a bit and so on. Okay, then I'm going to tell you another secret about the footage you've just seen, which is the running footage. So, okay, I look like a penguin when I run, okay? And I was wearing this long coat, and also I had mud on my bum. So I said to Josh, you are not filming me running, okay? Do not film me running. Anyway, of course you film me running, but that point of view stuff is actually Rob and Josh running, not me running. Because I did look like a penguin, and it would have added a note of humour which would have been inappropriate.
I fully concur with that. I
Yes,
think that's extremely interesting.
And that was a piece, it did very well online, and I think that's for a number of reasons. Partly, I think people were very, very interested in Ukraine, but also it combined a kitten and your correspondent nearly having her head shot off. And that is what we call TV gold.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, the last clip is from Sudan, and
this is just the week before last.
Yeah, I was about to say it's May.
Yes,
this year,
this
so
is the
really
week before
very
last.
recent, which is proof that the archive is yesterday's footage as well as footage from 1955.
This house was owned by a poet who fled to Saudi Arabia. The RSF took it over, but they didn't just trash the place as they did elsewhere, but turned it into a torture or maybe execution chamber. They dug a pit and placed a pulley on an iron bar on the ceiling to hoist people up and suspend them. And amongst the debris, mementos of the happy family who once lived here, who can never in their worst imaginings have predicted what would happen in their home.
That was shot by Soren Monk and the producer Zara Wasame, who is over there. And I have to say that there's a terrible war happening in Sudan at the moment. And it's the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. And because of Ukraine and Gaza, it's getting very little attention. And I have to say that Zara spent 9 months getting us visas and just pushing for access. And very few people have managed to get in. And that torture center which was created by the Rapid Support Forces, who were the militia who were fighting, nobody had filmed that before. We knew about it because I had read about it in a Sudanese newspaper, and even the Sudanese military who we were with didn't know about it. So that, again, in terms of the archive, that is the first time this torture centre or any similar torture centre by the RSF has been filmed. This is not just part of the historical record. This is the kind of thing that can be used in international criminal tribunals, because this is evidence. This is what these people do. And that's why I feel that reporting from a place like Sudan, which gets so little attention, is so important. And again, it's not easy. We're filming in 44-degree heat. I know a lot about Soren because we've worked together so long, and one of the things I discovered is he doesn't like to sleep in a room with rat droppings. And he doesn't like to sleep in a room where there's a generator and the petrol fumes are coming in. And means he might not wake up the next day. The conditions were not easy, but I feel that it's really important, and that is something that will go into ITN's archive, and that will be something that will be used by prosecutors, and that is something which will be shown in history.
Thank you so much, Lindsey. Amazing. Okay, we're going to move over to Philippa now. Philippa, we've got a greatest hits show. Well, actually, it's not greatest hits, it's a few hits, because there are so many amazing moments from your career. But let's take a watch a bit and then we can talk.
Spot on time, here is the man.
Mr. Donald J. Trump!
The Donald, big, brash, orange, and with that inexplicable hair.
Donald Trump, I invite you to Ukraine, to Kyiv. So if you can stop the war during 24 hours, I think it will be enough to come.
It's now too late to leave. Seek shelter as the fire approaches.
It's only 4:15 in the afternoon and it's 36 degrees. We've lost mobile phone reception. So at the moment we're depending on the local knowledge of these crews in front of us.
Then it touched down for 5 precious but awful minutes. And the scramble to rescue as many as we could began. An old man hurtled himself towards the door, even as boxes of aid were still heading out. Small children became trapped. I found myself dragging them, drooping and dehydrated, towards the back.
These are the pictures of the Lockerbie bomber that Libya now wants the world to see. His jubilant hero's homecoming caused too much trouble, out of kilter with the image this former rogue regime now wants to project to the world.
On the plane over, he indicated that could include a sweetener from the UK offering easier visas to Indians who wish to fill gaps in the UK labour market.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We drink lapsang, the leaves, yes. We drink lapsang leaves. It's very good.
You know, it's interesting that you have a different view, and I'm just trying to explore that.
And I don't want to. Because
mean-
I'm here to sell my movie. This is a commercial for the movie, make no mistake.
That's the only reason.
It's not my job to flesh it out.
No, it's my job to try and ask you to.
And
that's
I'm
all,
shutting
you know?
your butt down.
I love that final clip. How did you choose those? And what does it feel like watching them back together again, all put together?
Well, thanks to Ian Searcy, our brilliant researcher, for quickly getting that stuff together. I just kind of tried to think of stuff that was archivable and interesting. There's lots of things I've covered that other people have covered, and it just didn't. I just thought that was a good smooch together, basically. And the Tarantino, I did a talk for some students a couple of weeks ago, actually a month ago, and they half of the class of these MA students, more than half, had seen the Tarantino. I mean, it was shot in 2013, but it just keeps on running. And it was the first, I think it was one of the first sort of viral clips, really, before viral became a thing. So, but I mean, to go back to the top, obviously our US, both ITV and Channel 4 News' US bureaus have loads more Trump, but I just think that's the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, it's a phenomenon. And I also feel like the world's sort of changed since then. I was looking at the archive at, for example, the 2015 migrant crisis that I did loads of. And it looks so old, and we've seen so many pictures now of you know, huge swathes of humanity on the move. So it's funny, you know, some of the older stuff kind of dates very quickly, but you know, anyway. So Trump, and then Zelensky, I shot in February this year, and that was quite a thing to go over there. You know, the security measures that they take, and you know, meeting him himself.
And when you've got sort of a big setup interview like that, which obviously you know it's coming and you've got time to sort of think about it, is that actually more daunting than when you're sort of catching stuff on the fly when you've just got to react, or is it easier? I mean, how do you approach those two quite different sorts of challenges?
Well, when they're set up, you have in theory got more control, so you do know what the outcome you want out of it, and you have more of a kind of feeling for how it's going to go. But I mean, the Zelensky thing, you know, however much planning we did, and again with our amazing fixer Maxime Drabok, and Simon Stanley, our producer, who worked really, really hard to bring it, to get that to happen. So we thought we had it all under control, and then we landed at Warsaw Airport, and we got a message from the Zelensky team saying, oh, he'd like simultaneous translation. And I've got a lot of kit, but I haven't got a simultaneous translation kit with earpieces for everyone and a sound booth and that kind of thing. So that kind of threw a spanner in the works, which we managed to sort out with some very nice people in Kyiv who hired out their services. But so, I mean, even if it's set up, it's not set up. You know, there's always something that can go wrong. So it was a great relief when we got that. It all worked well. We had an absolute scramble to feed it back. You know, I had 3 cameras on that, so to 3 cameras, and it was an hour-long interview. He was very generous with his time. So to feed back 3 hours of material and do the program that night was quite a challenge. But we got there in the end, as I would like to say, usually always do.
Well, that's the joy of working for a bulletin channel. It's got to be done by the top of the hour.
Exactly. But then, for example, and then moving on to the Australia fires in 2020, that all my footage came back and went to ITN Productions, and that was used quite extensively in a documentary that they made about the Australia fires. So I saw, you know, all of my shots used. I mean, they used everything, you know, like even things that you'll think, oh, actually, I was just kind of focusing there, you know. Just, so that, you know, is another example of why I think you were going to ask me about, you know, how much do you film for? And you do tend to, if you can, overshoot. You know, for example, Lindsey's example of of the torture room. I mean, presumably the footage you just saw, there's a lot more of that would have been put into the archive, because you are in your head filming for history and evidence, you know, sometimes. So you do always overshoot if you can.
And do you have a sense when you're filming stuff of its historical importance? I mean, do you sometimes, when you're, you know, looking through the lens, thinking this is important, or are you just doing your job and going through the motions at the time?
Oh, definitely. I mean, obviously the first rush of what you're doing, you're just doing it. But there's a moment where you think, wow, this is happening in front of me. I mean, when I was with President Xi and Theresa and Philip May, you know, it was just so weird. And it was just me and Chinese photographers and cameramen and no other Brits, and I was just sort of like, this is, after, and it went on for so long.
How long did it go on for?
Well, in my head, like forever, but I mean, it was probably about half an hour maybe, which is a very long time in the presence of those people. And it was just really, at one point I took my eye away from the viewfinder and looked at President Xi, and I was like, that is unbelievable. I could actually probably, like, I don't know, touch him. I mean, I'd be in prison now, but it's just, you know, things like that, you know, you just think, I'm in the room with, like, I'm the only one, you know, just, so that you definitely feel it. But then I have to say that is very, very quickly compounded. I mean, especially also other stuff, in all seriousness, that is, you know, massive, like the Iraq piece, you know, you just think, it's all happening and you can't stop it. Then you start thinking, I can't mess this up, because this, you know, I can't sort of, I don't know, delete the tape. I mean, nobody, you know, it doesn't, we have all sorts of backups, but there's a very high level of responsibility, I would say, in those situations, definitely.
Amazing, thank you very much, Philippa. Okay, Mike, moving on. So Mike works at ITN Productions. This is our sort of predominantly non-news, sort of longer form programming. You have been working on World's Most Notorious Killers, which is it's a series of 5 feature lengths for Peacock, and I think you worked on 3 of them, and the one that we're going to focus on is The Fred and Rose West. I should just say that we're recording this and it's going to go up on YouTube, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'm afraid you're not going to see the next lot of clips because it's a sneak preview and they can't go out to the wider world. So everyone in this room, you're the lucky ones. Let's take a watch. Pretty gruesome stuff, Mike.
Yeah, sorry for bringing the mood down.
I'm not sure that Lindsey necessarily brought it up, but anyway.
Yeah, so that was a clip from an upcoming feature-length documentary that we made at ITN Productions for Peacock. And it wouldn't have been possible without the archive. It was, you know, an integral part of the winning of the commission in the first place. You know, it's one of the things that I guess is attractive to buyers of documentaries nowadays, is the ability to tell a story thoroughly, authentically, and immerse the audience in the story. Because part of our job is to try and recreate that mood of 1994. You know, many of our viewers don't remember the story. I mean, our audience for this is American, and they don't know who Fred West is. They don't know that Rose West is complicit in the murders, and it's our job to kind of recreate that memory of 1994 as realistically and immersively as we can. And you know, the 2 halves of doing that are to find a cast of people who were there, who can tell an authentic first-person story, and to have the archive to transport us back there. And that's, you know, that's what we were hoping to do in that scene. And I think you can see, you know, there was a very limited use of recreations there as well. And that's one of the things that, you know, we try to do. We try to kind of visually tell the story that is being told by the interviewee, and as much as we can, we use the archive, and then we kind of add to it with drama to try and recreate that moment. I mean, I was a student when this happened. Actually, I was doing my finals, and I remember kind of coming home from university that summer, wondering what the heck I was going to do with the rest of my life, and you know, doing some temporary summer jobs and working with kind of people who were like in the building trade, and they'd be listening to the radio every day, and they'd be hearing the news reports, and there'd be these conversations going on. You know, people saying, "How could she not know? How could she not know? Or there must be more. They'll find more." And I just remember when we got this commission, thinking, I'm trying to remember how that felt to be a viewer, to be the general public on the other end of the news reports, and how can we tell this story to a new audience in a way that it unfolds for them the way it did for me back then, for other people back then, and having the archives an essential part of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to play a second clip. Do you just want to sort of tee up the second clip as to how you incorporated some of the archive into the documentary?
Sure. Well, this is one of my favourite things as a viewer as well as a producer, is when somebody who was there reporting at the time is also an interviewee. And Steve Scott, who still works for ITN in sports, was the Southwest ITV correspondent at the time. And I think I'm right in saying that the ITN report was the very first camera on the scene. We didn't put that one in today because what we thought was interesting here was this was archive really propelling the story on its own without any help from the hand of the producer. This is the story of Fred and Rose West's first court appearance together since their arrest. So, as you can imagine, there was a lot of interest in knowing what would happen when the killer couple were in a room together again. And I won't ruin the surprise for those of you who don't know what happened.
Okay. Amazing, amazing. So what was the genesis of this? Because I mean, obviously there's been a sort of huge, well, I'd say it's a bit of a golden era really of archive documentarism with the growth of streamers, and true crime in particular, is so popular. How did you go about sort of pitching this, and how did archive play into that?
So it came about by quite a non-traditional route. So Ian, who's standing over there, has a fantastic relationship with Peacock, and we had the previous year made a documentary on the Fred and Rose West murders for Channel 5. It's a very, very good film, and it was out for sort of international sales, and the people at Peacock watched it. They thought it was a fabulous documentary. They really liked it, but they wanted their own. For various reasons, partly that they just wanted their own, partly because they wanted a more sort of American style of storytelling, partly because they had viewers who needed to have things explained to them that were taken for granted with British viewers, like where Gloucester is, for example.
And how to pronounce Gloucester.
And who Fred and Rose West are. But I think, there were a couple of things that really played into the fact that, that won us a commission. They liked the film, they like us as storytellers, but they also knew very well that we are effectively sitting on top of the archive of this story, and they know that they're going to get a film. When they order an 80-minute documentary, they know that 20 minutes of it is going to be ITN Archive, and that is going to be absolutely priceless, because right now, archive and first-person storytelling is documentaries. If you want to get a commission right now, you need to prove that you can take the viewers back there, both in terms of the footage and the people. And once upon a time, that just made your film better than everybody else's. Now, you only get the commission if you've got that. So, we had to prove to them we could find the cast, but we didn't have to prove to them that we could find the archive. They trusted that was there.
Yeah, and so you've done 3 for this series.
Yes.
Were all of them archive driven?
This was the most archive driven because of the access we have to the ITN archive. The other 2 stories we did, one was an Austrian story and one was a Belgian story. And there's a lot of archive in there as well, but we relied a little more heavily on recreations.
And I mean, how do you, when your development team is sort of thinking about ideas, how does having access to our archive here sort of play into that?
It's a big thing. It's a big thing. I mean, obviously we have, we pitch lots of different ideas, but we're known for being, very good factual producers from Britain. And so if there's a big story that is British or but that has international sort of resonance, then that's definitely something that we feel we can pitch. And if we have that, the backing of a vast library, then that really helps. And so, we work with Matt all the time. Myself and David and the producers and the team, constantly asking him what he's got, and if there's any extra stuff secreted in Slough somewhere he can find.
Secreted in Slough, that's a brilliant term, isn't it? Right, well listen, we are going to finish up because Channel 4 are going to go on air soon, and so we've been given kind of strict instructions about that. But I just want to finish with a few asks. I guess everyone loves the archive, but what they really hate is the emails that the archive team are constantly sending to the newsrooms about sourcing your material. What I really hope is that this hour has explained why it is so important that we get the right information with footage when it's filmed. Because if we don't know the copyright and we don't know where it was shot, we don't know who's in it, it makes it very difficult for us to reuse that properly afterwards. So a massive plea to everybody and to NAG your producers and to all your teams. It really matters. This is how we preserve and keep stuff if we've got the right information. The second one is we want your rushes. Obviously, we love the cut packages and the reported pieces that we get in that, but we're also aware that there is material that doesn't actually make it to air, and we want to make sure that we're capturing that, especially for sort of relicensing purposes. When somebody else is going to rework your stuff, that's often really important.
They really want your rushes.
Yeah, they really want your rushes. So, if ever stuff doesn't make it into a package and that feels heartbreaking, know that there is a home for it downstairs in the archive. And the final thing is to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We launched a YouTube channel called ITN Archive a little while ago. It's run by Ed McCarthy here, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's a brilliant way for us to surface clips and to give context to material on a day-to-day basis. So for example, at the moment, we've got some wonderful D-Day footage up to date, and we are also doing a sort of alternative election campaign where every day of the election campaign we're surfacing brilliant material from elections we've known and loved. So do go over to the site and do subscribe to that. And if you have any questions, any requests, the archive team are here in the basement and are always really happy to answer your questions. archive@itn.co.uk. And thank you very much for coming today. Final thing is to thank Olivia, who was the sort of genesis to this, who put it all together, Stars, who's operating the machine at the back, Ed, who edited all the videos, Francis from marketing for doing it, and the whole archive team who've just been fantastically supportive. So thank you all very much indeed. And thank you. Yeah, and thank you to the crews who shot the footage. Thank you, Lindsay, that's absolutely true. Okay, bye everyone.